Hey Nerdy Knitter, Tanya here. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a master hand knitter, and I'm here to help you knit sweaters and other garments that fit. I want you to knit garments that you love to wear, whether they're for you or for your loved ones. Now, in this week's video, I just want to talk about the things that I'm planning to knit in the upcoming months. I'm not going to be doing podcast episodes at the end of the month where I'm showing all of my knitting all the time, but I did want to keep you updated and let you know the projects that I'm working on. Kind of divided up into a few different categories. So I've got my list right here. So I've got design related projects where either for classes or things I'm teaching or designs that are coming out. And then also I've got a little membership group and we do knit along. So I've got a knit along project and then also some personal projects as well. So we're going to dive right in and go through the list. So my first project is for a drop shoulder sweater. So we'll start with the yarn. These are the yarns I'm using for this one. So this is using Knit Picks yarn, 2 colors of Hawthorne and then a color of Aloft. So this is 2 sock weight yarns, fingering yarns that are blends of superwash and nylon, I believe. So Camilla and Cobbler Speckle, and then Aloft in blush. So this is this alpaca? Yeah, no, mohair. This is kid mohair. I always get them confused, the mohair and the alpaca, but this one is super soft. I really like this one. So I've got the back panel done already. I'm doing sort of this color block idea. So the bottom is going to have a folded hem. So right now it's just kind of curling right there. I'm going to whip stitch that down after. And then after I bound off my stitches at the underarm, the top part I did in this speckled yarn. Now this is the back. So the front is reversed. I did some short row shoulder shaping, some neckline shaping. So I reversed the colors for the front and I'm working on that. That still is in progress. I have to start I'm doing a V-neck on the front for that piece. So this is a design sort of / class. I'm doing a class right now called Swatch to Sweater, where I'm walking people through how to use their yarn, knit a swatch, get their measurements, their body measurements and their gauge swatch measurements, and turn that into a sweater. So we're in the middle of that class right now. So I'm working on my sweater along with the students with the goal of this is going to be a pattern that will be released in probably February or March next year. With a full video tutorial for a beginner, like how to knit a drop shoulder sweater, walking you through the whole process. There'll be a few different customizations, you know, like 1x1 edging for the trim, or like I'm doing a folded hem on my version. I don't know what else yet. We'll work on that. And probably a couple options for necklines as well. So either a crew neck or a V-neck. But the more I add, the more that adds to the pattern. So I'm trying to like not add too much because it is supposed to be focused on beginners, and especially beginners who want to knit their first sweater that's done in pieces when they learn how to sew it all up, which is an important skill to have. I know it's not the popular thing to do, but it's important skill. It's important to have that skill, I believe. So this is coming right along. So construction-wise, it is knit flat in pieces. So this is the back, folded hem, just knit straight. I didn't do any extra body shaping or anything like that. Bound off a few stitches at the underarm, worked the depth of the armhole, and then I did do some short row shoulder shaping and some neckline shaping at the same time. So there is a bit here. So it might be, I don't think it's too much for a beginner. When there's a full video and like explanation for everything, then I think it's definitely possible. But I just like to have shoulder shaping on my sweaters when they're a drop shoulder. I just think it instead of having it stick out kind of at the top, you know, it gives it a nice little drape on the arm. So the back is done. I'm working on the front. I've finished up to the armhole, done a few rows. Now I've got to stop and I'm doing a V-neck at the same time. And then the short row shoulder shaping, and then it will be on to the sleeves. And I haven't decided yet. I think color-wise, the sleeves will be mostly the darker pink, and then I'm going to have like a big block of the speckled yarn in there somewhere. Just, I wanted to mix and match and have it like be all kind of color blockish. So it's a little bit different. And then when I do the tutorial, I'm going to do it with like just one strand of, I think, either sport or DK. I can't remember what my gauge is, but I will use a sport or DK that gives me the same weight or gauge as this, and then knit a sample from my mannequin back there when I do the tutorial. So this is the first project that I'm going to be knitting over like the fall, winter-ish season. I want to get this done. It's already making really good progress, and I hopefully should get that done fairly soon. So project number 2, I have to I only got a little bit of space here, so I'm taking one project, putting it away, pulling out the next. I've got yarn and stuff here. So the next project that's on my list is an assigned pooling project. Now this is coming up, not a secret, so I can share about it, but it is coming up for a make-along in the spring in conjunction with Hypnotic Yarn. So Hypnotic Yarn has dyed the yarn in 3 different colors. And I've got 2 of my samples finished. I've got 1 more to go, and I'm going to record a tutorial with that one. So with this yarn, you have like a background color that you use for your background stitch. In this case, it's just going to be garter stitch. And then when you get to your, I'm trying to get this going the right way here, get to like in this case, this hot pink, then you do like this fun little stitch. And in this case, it's just a very simple daisy stitch. And I will have that in the pattern all spelled out. I have to weave in my ends still and get these 2 samples washed and blocked. So there's going to be 2 different sizes as well. There's going to be like a full shawl size that takes, well, not quite 2 skeins of yarn. I still have this much yarn left over, but a 2 skein project for this. And then a smaller, should say, it's kind of cool the way it just kind of just did this pattern right there. I was like, oh, it's like an EKG readout or something, you know, like just this staggered thing. And then on the ends, it didn't do that, but in the center, it did this kind of fun pooling thing. But it's knit tip to tip. So you start at 1 tip and you slowly increase along one edge to get you like the shawl depth. It's not a super, super deep shawl, but it is nice and long. And then you do a section in the middle where you don't do any increasing or decreasing, and then you start decreasing 1 stitch, you know, very slowly down to the other tip. So it's got a nice long wingspan, not super deep. So, I mean, you can adjust the pattern. It's very simple. And then, so that's the full 2 skein version. And then there's also a 1 skein sort of little scarflette version. Let me get this the right side up, which is like this one too, zigzagged right down the center. Isn't that so neat the way that happened? So just a little scarflette version that you can just tie around your neck. So 1 skein version of that. And I have got another 1 skein version to do. So the pattern's exactly the same. It's just like the stitches, the number of stitches, like you'd stop much more soon for this one than you would for the bigger shawl to get like less depth. But it's still actually quite long, not as long as the shawl, but I wanted it big enough to like wrap around your neck a couple times and kind of tie it if you wanted to. It's definitely long enough for that. So both of these I have to get washed and blocked. But, and 1 more sample knit up so I can go ahead and record the tutorial for that. But that will be coming out next spring as a full make along. You can, I'm pretty sure that I'll try to remember to come back and add a link here. So if anybody's watching this in the future, then they'll find a link for the make along. Well, the kit, if you want to get the kit from Hypnotic Yarns, that is opening pre-orders, I believe, in January. So I will make sure I put a link, or I'll post it somewhere in the community. But just, we like to have options. We did this last year with a different project. It was a shawl 3 skein project, so it was quite large. But we wanted to go and do something a little smaller and easier this time. So you have your 1 skein option, or you can do the 2 skein size. You can pick which one you want. You'll have 3 different colors to choose from as well, all based on different flowers, which I think is really nice and spring-like. So that will be coming up pretty soon too. So the next design related project that's coming up is a Steeked Cowl. So I've got a video coming out actually next week that walks you through the 5 different ways you can secure a steek before you cut it. So that will be sort of like a precursor to this video, which will be a full tutorial on how I am going to knit the cowl, like a full pattern tutorial. There'll be a pattern, there'll be the tutorial, and I will demo one of those methods for steeking with my cowl. I actually really like needle felting, so that's probably what I'm going to demonstrate for that. But next week's video will walk you through all the different ways you can do it, so you can choose which steeking method you want to use. But this I wanted to do because I know that steeking is one of those scary things. When you think about bringing scissors to your knitting, that can kind of make you pause, really, you know, especially if you've knit a whole sweater and then the thought of cutting that and messing it up. Yeah, that's not so much fun. So this is like just a little project to start with. So you can test cutting your knitting on something that's not super small. I was thinking like mittens or or not mittens, but like some kind of small wristlet or something like that. But that's such a small circumference. It's kind of fiddly to do stranded knitting, I think, on something so small. So this is big enough that, 16-inch circular needle. So it's not super small, but it's still quick enough. This didn't take me very long to knit. I finished this, goodness, in a couple of evenings, I think. It wasn't very, very long. Maybe 3, maybe 4 evenings. I don't know. But then there is the finishing. But you have your steek right in the center here. You cut that open and then you have to secure both sides. So this is my first sample. I'm going to do a full tutorial with a second sample in different colors. I don't have the colors here. It's a shade of blue and like a very light silvery pearly color. But this sample is done in rouge and white. So I like a good high contrast color. So that's what we've got going on here. Using Knit Picks palette, which is a great yarn for steeking, stranded knitting, anything like that. And so this starts with a little folded hem that has, I've got a thing for folded hems, I think, lately, and a little picot edge, and then you fold that to the inside and whip stitch it down. After you're all done, then you cast on your steek stitches. You start knitting this in the round until the colorwork portion is done. Bind off the steek stitches, do the other folded hem up here, sew those down, and then you secure your steek in the center, cut that, and then add your button band here on the edge. And very simple, just a little yarn over button band there, and add your buttons. And you secure your steek inside that folded band. So even the inside looks pretty nice, I think. I'm not like a wonderful finisher, but I think it looks really good. You can't see any of the steek. All those cut edges are covered. So the design's all done. I've already knit the first sample. I want to make a couple changes because this does have a tendency sort of to roll a little bit, that folded hem. So I'm going to adjust the pattern as I'm knitting the second sample and work it on fewer stitches to pull it in a little bit so it doesn't roll like that. But it does, when I just like this, it just lays flat, which is nice, but I don't want it to curl when it's getting worn. So I got to adjust the pattern, finish writing it up, and knit the second sample, but that hopefully will be coming out next month. So I have one more project coming up that's sort of, well, that is design related for a pattern that will be coming out in December for the Chevron Adventure shawl. So I've done a few shawls in my Color Adventure, Chevron Adventure series where I use a color changing yarn, and every time the color changes, you change to a different stitch pattern. So I've got some that are top down. I've got a top down triangle, an asymmetrical triangle, and then a scarf that I did for Knit Picks using their Brava stripe yarn. Now I'm going to do another one using another yarn. This is Cotton Supreme Waves from Universal Yarn. The color is called Juice Bar. It's really nice and soft. I really like this yarn. So the yarns for this type of project are color changing self-striping yarns, but not self-striping like you'd see in a sock with, you have to knit a small circumference to get these little narrow stripes. These are bigger stripes in a bigger yarn. So you get like in a project, it's hard, how do I explain this? Not on a sock. Like you want a self-striping yarn, but you want big blocks of color for a larger project, not something small like a sock. So like these other shawls I've done, I will put some pictures here so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to be doing another shawl in that collection, the Chevron Adventure shawl. And it's going to be knit sort of like on a bias chevron arrow shape. And then every time you change colors, you change to different basic stitch pattern, like pretty simple. None of them are really out there, but just kind of those, I like potato chip knitting, where it's just, you want to get to the next section because you're changing colors, you're changing to another stitch pattern, but it's not super hard. Like you don't have to pay a lot of attention and get, like distracted by a chart or make sure your stitch count is right. Like it's pretty basic. So it's not super hard, but enough interest, I think, that you want to get to the next color so you can change to your next stitch pattern. I like projects like that. And like I've heard them called potato chip knitting. You just want to, have another little chip. You want to keep working a little more because you've got a color change coming up or a new stitch pattern coming up. So that is the plan for December. I haven't even started this one yet. I don't even know where it is. I have to dig it out somewhere, but I knit a sample in like some Karen Cakes yarn just to like work out my stitch patterns and stuff. But Universal Yarns, it has sent me some yarn to use for the design. So this tutorial will be coming out in December along with the pattern, and those on the email list will be getting a Christmas surprise. They'll be getting this pattern for free, and a discount code from Universal Yarns if they want to use the same yarn, because this type of shawl needs to have like a self-striping yarn, but not a sock yarn, but has big blocks of stripes. So like this Cotton Supreme from Universal Yarn. So if that's something that sounds good to you, make sure you get on my email list and you'll be the first to hear about it. So my next couple projects are member related. I have a small membership called the Nerdy Knitting Society, where we just meet every Wednesday. We have knit nights or knit and chats in the afternoon. We have a quarterly knit along, which is totally optional, and I try to participate, and I'm still not done with our last quarter's knit along. We usually have some kind of a theme around that, and the people in the group are mostly sweater knitters, so it's a lot of sweater knitting talk. We have like a monthly sweater clinic where you bring your knitting questions about sweaters and fit and all of that, and we work through those issues and help with like waist shaping or adjusting something in a pattern, things like that. But our last quarter, we did English tailored shoulder shaping or European shoulder shaping. It's a very specific type of shoulder. I'll pop a picture here of the one I'm working on called the Gullane Tank, where it has this very defined line that doesn't sit on the shoulder, it sits along the back. And it's fun to knit, not very difficult. The pattern is pretty simple. It has lots of extra things in it, like bust shaping, and you can knit it flat, you can knit it in the round, however you want to knit it. I decided to knit mine flat, so you start at the top and do the back to the armhole. I suppose you could just knit down the whole back, but then I just stopped when I got there, and then I picked up the stitches and did the front, and then I alternated back and front because I wanted to use all of my yarn because I wanted to have it as long as possible and use everything up. And then I went back and finished the neckline and the sleeves, which are just a 1x1 rib. There's no sleeves actually, just pick up stitches and do a bit of ribbing. And then I do have a bit of yarn left, so I want to keep knitting the front till I use it all up. So my yarn is CotLin DK. In this color is called Marina. And this, everybody else was done. The knit along is finished, but I'm not quite finished. But I finished everything at the top already. So there's my neckline all done. I picked up my sleeve stitches. So those are all finished as well. So it's just like a drop shoulder, casual top. And I am just finishing up the bottom. I'd sewed my side seams together. I did do that flat because it's a cotton yarn. It's a bit heavy. I wanted that extra structure of having a seam on there. So I sewed the side seams up. So now I'm just sort of working back and forth still on the front to finish that up and get it the same length as the back. Then I'll probably just do the ribbing in the round once I get that all finished. But that's all that's left, is just like using up the rest of my yarn. This is like the rest right here, I think. Might have a bit more just to finish off at the bottom. But it's coming right along. So this is sort of not quite, it is kind of a personal project because it's a garment I wanted, but it's within the topic of what our members are doing. Which brings me to our next member knit along, which is just started. So our next member knit along is for the Ranunculus. I have not knit one. And well, we do have the option, if you didn't want to do that, you could do a top-down circular yoke with some lace, and that would be fine. Like, that's really the only caveat or rule for the knit along is that. So here is mine so far. Oops, the bag's falling on the floor behind me. I have made a lot of modifications, but I have finished like the part of the yoke. I was about to say color work, but there is no color work. The stitch patterns and the lace in the yoke. So the yarn is Knit Picks Galileo in Aquarius. So this is a blend of 50% merino and 50% viscose from bamboo. Nice, really nice drape. I really like this yarn. I've used it before in the past. It's got a really good drape. So modifications, I have a whole list, which I'm not going to explain all of them in this video, but I'll tell you some. First of all was the neckline. I did not know, I like to come back and finish my circular yoke necklines after. So I can make a decision about how close I want it to sit up to my neck, how many short rows I want to do, and all of that. So I decided to skip all of the neckline stuff and go right to like however many stitches you need before you begin the patterning. So I did that. Then my second thing, before I even cast on, I had to think about was I don't want the super open gauge that the pattern had. I want a sweater that I can wear without having to wear something underneath it. And at 3 stitches to the inch with, I think, what is this, DK or Sport, that sport weight yarn, that was not going to happen. This is going to be really open and drapey fabric. The drape I wanted, the openness I do not, because I don't want to have to wear something underneath it. So my next thought was, what did I want to do? Because neckline wise, it's going to make it pretty small if I just cast on the amount there, even with a smaller gauge. And I knew I don't want a big, like a close crew neck. And that's what I would get if I just cast on that number of stitches, even after skipping all of the neckline stuff, because my gauge would be so different since I'm using sport weight yarn, but I'm using like a US 5 needle instead of the US 10 in the pattern. So what I decided to do was, since my gauge was pretty much double the stitches to the inch, like I think the pattern's like 3 stitches to the inch or so, my gauge is like 6 stitches to the inch. Well, I didn't swatch, but I've used this yarn enough to know what my gauge is, and I figured I could knit the yoke and then wash and block, which I've just done, and then I can take some measurements from this to see what my gauge is before I decide the size I want to follow. But before I can even follow the size, I'm not going to be able to, I don't think. I took the stitch count that you have just before you start all the decorative stuff, and I doubled it. And I just went through and made sure the numbers would be okay, like for the rest of the patterning, to make sure that wasn't going to mess up anything. It was totally fine. But where my stitch count is kind of double to the inch, I figured that would work for making the yoke the way I wanted it to look. And so that yoke part is done, and it's had a good wash. It's been sitting to dry. It's totally dry now, so I can take some measurements from this, check my gauge, and it's still, even on the 5, a little bit loose. I might go down to a 4 for the body. We'll see. So those are the first changes I've made. I've changed the gauge, so I had to cast on twice the number of stitches to get the neckline I wanted, because I didn't want a crew neck. I don't want it to be way up there. Hopefully it's going to work out. I think it is. Like if I just hold it up to myself, it's going to be low enough that I can come back in. So I used a provisional cast on, so my neckline is just hanging out on a needle cord. So I can just pop my needles on there and do some short row shaping and then finish the neckline off however I'd want to do it. So my next step is to figure out my gauge and then placing the markers for the raglan increases, because I know I'm going to be moving some stitches as well. When I knit a yoke, I like to take some stitches from the back and put them in the front, because I need the extra across my bust. I don't need extra fabric floating around on my back. So when you do like that full bust circumference, depending on your bust, if you're much bigger in the front than you are across, if your back's pretty flat, all that fabric should be where you need it on the front. And I have knit a yoke before where, divide it straight in half, and I had too much like excess fabric in the back. Even this one is a little, I moved stitches to the front, but it's still oversized. But I would have had a lot of extra fabric in the back if I hadn't done that. So it's just kind of a standard thing down. Now I do, but I have to figure that out before I place my raglan markers, because that's going to affect where those markers are placed. So that's my next decision to make. And then after that, it's just knit the sleeves and body. I don't think I'm doing anything special there, but I did make, a couple drastic changes. The stitch count's totally different, so I don't think I'll be able to follow the pattern. I don't think I really need to anyway. It's just the 3 tubes, the 3 sleeves and the body. I can figure out my sleeve shaping on my own for that. I have a video about how to do that if you need help, so I'll try to remember to put a link for that down below. But yeah, that part's done. So now that's my next step, is to get some gauge measurements, and then see how I want to divide things up between the sleeves and the body, so I can place my raglan markers and get knitting for the rest of the sweater. But I don't foresee any issues with that. All of the fun stuff is kind of done now. Now it's just a lot of knitting, but I will be going to Prince Edward Island next week to teach, and it's quite a long drive. It's about 12 hours-ish, 12 to 13. So I will be taking this along, and my other one, that assigned pooling shawl, I'll take that and finish up my last sample. But this will probably be the project I knit in the car, because I don't have to really think, as I'm just knitting everything. But once I get my math figured out and all of that. So the yoke was really fun. I do like this idea of like all of the sizes. No sizes are chosen till the yoke is finished. Everybody's doing, 2 different neckline options, but the stitch counts are the same for all the sizes until now. Like you finish your yoke and now you place your raglan markers and start changing sizes based on body size. But it actually kind of makes sense, because nobody changes a ton through like this part of your body. if you have like any sort of fluctuations in weight or anything, all of that happens down below. You don't really change much through your neck or your shoulders. So it's interesting, and it makes sense that you could get away with that basically using the one size. But yes, my biggest change is with the stitch count, where I doubled the stitch count right away, just so I could have a different gauge and a different fabric. So I have one more teaching project that's coming up. I'm teaching a class called Super Spiral Socks, where you knit socks with no heel. Like it's just a spiral tube. Basically, you use this one uses a garter rib pattern to knit your tube, and then you finish off with a toe. And then the spiral, the way it sits on your foot, it creates your heel. You don't really need a heel the way this fits, but it's really fun to do, and you can skip the heel shaping. It's kind of fun just to have a little tube. You can keep knitting. The only thing you're doing is creating a spiral. So you use whatever rib pattern you want, and you just kind of offset it by a stitch every 4 or 6 rows, and you get a spiral. So I've got a class coming up about that. So I'm working on, I have a sample pair in like fingering weight. So I wanted to do like a DK weight slipper sock for like the class sample. So it's a little quicker to start knitting instead of like fingering weight's going to take more yarn, obviously. So it's going to take longer. So I wanted something that was a little quicker for the class. So I've worked one sample or one sock. Now I've got to do the second sock. So this is using West Yorkshire Spinners, the Croft 100% Shetland Islands wool. And it's really nice and squishy. And I wanted like, yeah, some really cozy like slipper socks I can wear around the house. Well, I'll have to knit myself another pair because this is a sample for class, and I do need another pair. I wear like some slipper socks, and I'm getting holes in the bottom of them. So it's time to, and I didn't knit those. Those are like ones I had purchased ages ago. So I think it's time to knit myself a pair of slipper socks. I might do some no heel socks for myself as well. So that one sample is done, and I've got to knit the other sock sample. So it's ready to go for that class. So that will be another project. Now, my last two things are sort of just personal things that I want to work on over the next couple of months. First thing is a pair of gloves for my daughter. So this yarn is handspun yarn, 2 skeins that I've spun up of wool of the Andes into a fingering-ish, sport-ish yarn, somewhere in there between fingering and sport, depending on the thickness. Most of it's pretty even, but there are some spots that are a little bit thicker than others. I'm working on spinning more evenly, and I think I am doing that pretty well. So these are coming along, but I need to get them done before Christmas. So really got to get them finished. So the cuff part is finished. The thumbs, the gusset's done. The stitches for the thumb are put on hold. I think I'm pretty much where I need to be before I need to start doing the fingers. So I have to have my daughter come try them on so I can check and make sure they're the right length before I start with the pinky. So yeah, she knows about them already. And especially when you have to keep trying them on all the time, it's not like it's going to be a surprise for Christmas. But I want to get these done by Christmas time so they'll be ready to put in her stocking. So that I've got to work on. But I kind of need to do that when she's here so I can keep putting them on her hand to make sure each of the fingers is working out right. So my last project is Manche by Jennifer Beal. Now, I really like her patterns. I've knit one of her tops before. I've got quite a few of her patterns saved to knit at some point, and I have Manche. I've already swatched for it. I just haven't cast it on yet because I have to make a modification right out of the gate. Because you start with the sleeves, and I have to adjust the sleeve length. My arms are always short compared to what like the average is for patterns. So I have to make that change first of all. But I am using Knit Picks Swish yarn, which is 100% superwash merino. So this is my main color. This is Gulf Stream. And then for the stranded knitting across the arm, I'm using these 2 colors. So white and Arctic. So just like a pale blue and a white, and this one to go with it for the body of the sweater. So I'm not going to get to this one right away, probably because I've got like the drop shoulder sweater and the ranunculus, and I'm going to finish up the Gullane. That's 3 sweaters right there. I want to get them done first, or at least a couple of them finished, and then I can get this one going. So this is my personal. I want to knit this for myself. I like her patterns. I love the way she combines like stranded knitting and texture. And this one looked interesting to me. So, but it starts with the stranded knitting that runs down each of the arms, and it's knit in one long piece with some steeks. I think it's knit all in one. I have to go back and look at the pattern again. I don't think you're doing each one separately. You're knitting both in a tube and then cutting them, and you've got the 2 separate strips. But the issue is my arms are short compared to standard patterns, so I have to adjust the length of that stranded knitting tube because I don't want it to be too long for my arm. I want it to fit without like being super long. But it goes like from your wrist all the way up onto your shoulder, so I've got to measure and figure that out. The swatch has been done since last year, so I'm not going to re-swatch. I don't think my gauge has changed in a year, hopefully. So we were going to stick with the swatch I've already done. But I do, because I have to make that modification right away, that's the first step, is doing the stranded knitting, but I've got to change it. I've got to make it smaller so it fits my shoulder length. But then like you knit that and then you pick up stitches, I think, from both sides to knit the fronts and the back. And I don't know, it's been a while since I've looked at the pattern. So I've got to make that modification. So I haven't done it. It's just been like in the to knit pile. I've got all my yarn. I've even swatched, but it's just been put on the back burner because I mean, my design work and teaching and all of the other stuff has to come first. And then my personal knitting happens on the weekends. And sometimes I just want to like sit and relax. I don't want to have to think about math and modifications and all of that. But so I think, yeah, after I get my drop shoulder sweater finished, which it's in the home stretch now. The sleeves, I've already figured out the shaping for them. So it's just a matter of knitting. And the Gullane is almost done. Ranunculus, I do have to do a little bit of math to figure that out. So this will be my next math thing to sort out, will be this. But I'm hoping in the next month or so I can get this cast on and work. And I think this would be another good one to like show the process of like when I'm trying to figure out how to modify a pattern. Because this one is very different because of the way like you're starting with the sleeves and doing that little sort of saddle shoulder kind of, but with stranded knitting. And steeking and all of that. So I've got to adjust that first. So it's on the plans to actually get this going. I've been talking about this now for a year and have not knit it. But hopefully that'll be the next thing I want to get on my needles. I have another couple small projects, you know, like some fingerless gloves using some scraps and a bag, like a grocery tote or whatever, using some leftover hemp yarn. But there's nothing really, like they're just sitting in a bag. When I get to them, I get to them. No big deal. But this is one I definitely want to get to over the next few months. So that's my list of upcoming projects. I've got them all written down, ready to go. For the most part, I think these will be finished by Christmas. So maybe in January, we'll have a little update on how things are going. At that point, the only thing left from this list should be my Manche cardigan. And hopefully by then I'll have cast it on. We'll have to do a whole video just about that one, I think. And maybe the Ranunculus too. We shall see. But that's it for this video. Thank you for hanging out with me and checking out my knitting plans. If you want to keep hanging out with me, I'm going to put a video right here. You can click right there, and I'll see you in the next video.